Oh my god! Woohoo! Amazing, man. That's absolutely crazy. The world's biggest moth. It has been an absolute dream of mine to see these insects in real life. Can you believe it? It's absolutely incredible. Absolutely amazing. So what is it anyway? This insect here is the white witch moth. It's also known as Thysania agrippina. And today we are going to do a special episode about the biology of this incredibly impressive, gigantic species of moth. Wow, so amazing. My name is Bart Coppens and I am the owner of the biggest moth and butterfly channel on YouTube. And if some of you have been waiting for me to show you these moths alive, I know you have been for many years. And today is the day that it finally happens for real. And today we are going to hunt the world's biggest moth and tell you about their biology. It's time to start the intro. Welcome to the biggest, best and longest white witch video on the internet. The world's biggest moth. The world's biggest species of moth. There is no moth species that has a larger wingspan than this species. The world's biggest species of moth. Oh my god, and it is huge. Ladies and gentlemen, this is your favorite online entomologist, Bart Coppens, also known as the Sexy Moth King. And today I am in Brazil, that's right. I came to the country of Brazil to study and document the local species of butterflies and moths. And this work that I am doing in Brazil, I am doing in collaboration with the Regoa Conservation Project. And here in the local area I am studying all the large species of butterflies and moths. But today I came across something spectacular. I located a population of white witches. This here is Thysania agrippina, the white witch moth. And indeed, in terms of wingspan, not wing surface area, but wingspan from wingtip to wingtip, this is the moth with the longest wings, with the largest wingspan, therefore making it officially the largest species of moth on planet Earth. Wow, look at its underside, it even has some metallic blue shine, can you see it? What an incredible beast! What a magnificent animal, isn't it? Wow, just look at that shiny blue on the underside. It really is an awesome moth and a species I always wanted to see. It is a dream come true to show you the white witch. Now on this YouTube channel I have been documenting and studying moths for about 7 years non-stop. I filmed thousands and thousands of species. But there was always one species that was always missing. It was the king of moths. It felt bad to have a channel about moths, but have the biggest species of moth in the world missing from my channel. That makes no sense, right? It's like the best thing is missing. So today, after 7 years of making videos about moths intensively, I'm so proud to say it is finally here, a video about the white witch moth, Thysania agrippina. So what's cool is I found these moths in the middle of a rainforest when it was very rainy. And here I was looking in the vegetation and I saw them sitting against the tree trunks. If you guys are curious, let me show you how I was catching them in the wild. It's a very funny clip, let me show you. Ladies and gentlemen, since I was a very young Bart Coppens, It has always been my dream to see the world's biggest moth alive. It is the white witch moth, Thysania agrippina. And to see this species you have to go to Central or South America. This species, from my experience, is only found in deep and mature forests, like this rainforest here around me. It's very impressive, isn't it? Here you will find them on the bark of specifically white trees. The moth itself is white, and despite being the biggest moth in the world, its camouflage is very effective. The moth itself is creamy white with black bands, and therefore they always know how to sit on the bark of white trees where they camouflage themselves. They always sit vertically with their wingtips pointed to the ground and another to the sky. You rarely see them sit horizontally. They know exactly where to sit on the tree bark. And I am very excited because this has been a dream of mine, you know. On my channel I have a lot of butterflies and moths in captivity. But the truth is, there are so many species that you just cannot see in captivity. You have to find them in the wild. And it's a dream of mine to find the white witch, the world's biggest moth. Let's start looking. I know they can be in this area.
So I'm taking note of this to know the months where you see this, you know? So February.
Wow.
And they have a kind of a powerful flight, you know?
It's the first one I ever see in the wild. Fantastic.
I'm almost sure that's a male.
Wow. Here they officially are, for the first time, alive on my YouTube channel, the white witch moth, in the middle of the Atlantic rainforest in Brazil. There were many of them today, sitting on the trees. In fact, this species is not particularly rare in Regua. These enormous moths are nocturnal. However, it is possible to spot them during the day too, if you are lucky. You see, their behavior tends to be predictable. They always rest on the trunks of white or light colored trees. That's right. Not just that, they tend to use the same trees over and over to use as a hiding spot. These moths are so large that they are very conscious of where their camouflage works. You can imagine that for a moth that is this big, sitting on a dark surface while the moth is white is almost a death sentence, considering how easy it would be to spot a moth that's larger than most birds. Therefore, they refuse to settle anywhere except on light-colored surfaces. In the forest, this mostly translates to the bark of white-colored or light brown trees. The moths always sit vertically against the tree trunks with one wingtip pointed to the sky and one wingtip pointed to the ground. In this pose, they tend to sit still all day. These moths only fly at night, so during the day they are merely resting and waiting for the night to arrive. Now, as you can see, not all the moths are in great condition. Some of them appear to be missing part of their wings. These moths are likely to have long lifespans in the wild, although there is very little official data when it comes to this. But I suspect they can live for several months at least. As moths age, their wings gradually deteriorate and become damaged. Damaged wings is usually a sign of predator attacks, but also simply old age. So now we are going to catch them. But wait, why are we going to catch them? Because I am an entomologist that is working in Brazil, and my job is to investigate the local species of butterflies and moths. Yes, catching them may stress them and may even rub some of their hairs off, but I do plan to release all of them back into the wild, and the knowledge that we gather from our observations will help the conservation of this species in the long run. My job is to study all the moths that I encounter here and make a list of the local species, on top of making close-ups of them and observations in captivity, This helps their conservation, and I spread knowledge and information about these animals on social media and on other platforms and publications. Anyway, let's get started and see if I can catch some of those. Blah. No, it's fine. Hello everyone, this is Bart. Today I'm in the Atlantic rainforest in Brazil. And as you can see, it's raining. They call it a rainforest for a reason. But I'm here to show you something. I'm out here in the rain for a special reason, because I just spotted two of the largest moths in the world. They're sitting here on a tree trunk above me. It's the white witch, Thysania agrippina. I've mentioned them several times before on my channel. So let's go to grab and see if I can actually catch them. So how the fuck do I get up there? This episode was made in collaboration with REGWA, Reserva Ecologica de Guapiaçu in Brazil. I work here temporarily as an entomologist and document butterflies and moths for scientific and entertainment purposes on social media and in other publications. You have to be careful because sometimes you see it coming. Number one. This one already has a bit of damage, so it's okay. And even if they damage, let's say that it's for research, right? Not like I want to hurt them for fun. I want to investigate them. So can you point to me where the second tree is? It's hard to see from here. Oh, it's the other side, right?
This is closer, yeah.
Okay.
Careful, careful with those spikes.
Yeah. My main issue is falling down here. That would be a problem. Is it here?
Yeah, yeah. They're in front of you.
Oh. Perfect. Oh fuck! That one was gone away.
Yeah, it's almost like a bat.
Shit.
You see that bad one?
Ah,
Yeah.
2 out of 3 is not bad, right?
Not at all. Well done. Woo, do you think they were mating?
No, I don't think so. Wow, that's fantastic. Can you protect my camera a little bit from the water?
Yeah, how?
Just be careful it doesn't get too wet.
Yeah. Can I?
Fantastic. That's great. Oh my god, here it is, finally after all these years. White witch moths. I actually caught several specimens today in the forest. Finally, after all those years, we can finally examine this legendary beast up close and make some observations and conclusions. Now please keep in mind that I actually managed to catch 4 of them today, and close-ups of these animals are actually shots of different individuals each time. I got 4 of them. And now we can finally get into discussing the biology of this species. This is an educational YouTube channel that wants to teach people about insects, so prepare for a Bart Coppens style biology lesson. The first lesson of today is, where is this insect found? Yes, I'm going to include presentation style slides in this video as well, combined with footage of live animals. So the range. The white witch occurs all the way from Uruguay to Mexico reportedly. This, if we think about it, is quite a large range extension that is all the way from Central America to some of the more subtropical parts of South America. So records of this species are present from northern Argentina, Uruguay, Brazil, Bolivia, Guyana, Peru, Ecuador, French Guiana, Venezuela, Colombia, Panama, Nicaragua, Honduras, El Salvador probably, Guatemala and Mexico. Now upon seeing this, some people watching this channel may wonder, is this species also found in the United States? Well, there is no proof that it was ever caught in the United States, although Wikipedia curiously states the following information. The white witch occurs from Uruguay to Mexico and appears as a stray as far north as Texas in the United States. I, however, and other entomologists too, are very skeptical about this information. Science, ladies and gentlemen, science. Today I am going to provide you with a lot of official scientific sources and documentation to prove some of my claims. And one of the questions that we are talking about right now is the white witch moth Thysania agrippina also found in the United States of America? I am very skeptical about any claims that the white witch can be found in the United States of America. Some people say they've seen specimens in Texas, but the thing is the official records are very vague about this. And as of today, I don't know anyone who has a collection in a specimen in their collection that was verified to have been caught on the United States of America soil. So this is what the record states. And I found an interesting source that talks about this. It is from Texas Entomology, a very informative website that talks about entomology. And it seems that a lot of the information that claims that the white witch can be found up to the United States is questionable and based on a record that was published in 1965, the Lepidoptera of Florida, an annotated checklist, Arthropods of Florida and Neighboring Land Areas, Volume 1, Florida Department of Agriculture, Division of Plant Industry. And of course the website speculates and says, of course I have the Kimball reports, and he reports the following, that Thysania agrippina was found in Florida, and it says there is a fine specimen of this in the University of Tampa collection, taken in Tampa by Professor C.T. Reed of the Biology Department. Unfortunately, the body has been eaten by their masters. So these are basically pests, beetles in a collection. And it seems that pests in the collection have eaten the body of the specimen. That's not good news. And it says, of course, it is a stray. So Charles Kimball began collecting Lepidoptera, mostly moths, in Florida in 1946. After 1951, Kimball spent most of each year on Siesta Key, near Sarasota in Florida. Kimball's study of Lepidoptera led to the 1965 publication of an annotated catalog for the state. His former base near Sarasota is approximately 40 miles south of Tampa. According to the Horace Burke, who is a professor, Department of Entomology, and Theodore Reed, who was an incessant traveler, collector and scholar. He either attended, taught or administered at universities in Kansas, Maryland, New York, Iowa. Yes, this is a lot of fluff. Let's get to the substance here. So in 1944, this person, Reed, he joined the University of Tampa as the head department of entomology. And in addition to insects, Reed collected birds, eggs and mollusks. He was interested in marine biology, botany, poetry and religion, as well as entomology. And he cited as his primary reference Reed. Reed obviously had many wide-ranging pursuits, but apparently the proper care, labeling and publishing of his records didn't get the attention they should have. So this is interesting because the person was known for not very accurately keeping records keeping the data on the specimens, nor publishing the records that he makes. And it says, neither Kimball nor Hepper report a date for the specimen, which strongly indicates that Reed's specimen lacked a label. An old unlabeled specimen of a primarily South American moth with no Caribbean population reported from Tampa raises questions about the validity of the record. Unfortunately, Reed's collection and any notebooks that he had at the University of Miami were lost to fire. There may be more details on Reed's specimen among Kimball's papers at the McGuire Center for Lepidoptera and Biodiversity in Gainesville. And Florida does have the highest percentage of exotic insects of any state except Hawaii. And some research found 271 exotic insect species reported in the literature for the first time between 1971 and 1991. However, some of them came by as fly-ins and many as contaminants of cargoes, which means many of the exotic insects that can be found in Florida or the state of Hawaii are accidentally transported there by cargo, for example, by air cargo or with ships in which they can hitchhike from tropical locations. It said it is possible that Reed's specimen arrived in Florida by plane or ship cargo. And this is a little bit questionable, given the information presented. So ladies and gentlemen, that's a whole lot of information, and some of you probably don't know what it means because I read it really fast in my terrible bumbling Dutch accent. But I'm going to explain it to you what a ground line is. So there was a publication, an annotated checklist of the Lepidoptera of Florida, and the white witch was included in the checklist based on one specimen that was found in a collection and caught by a university professor named Mr. Reed. However, according to this document, Mr. Reed was known for not really always taking care of his specimens in the best way possible. A lot of them were unlabeled, and it was suspected that some of the data that was included with the specimens may have been incorrect. So what does it mean when a specimen is unlabeled? Well, in a scientific collection of butterflies and moths, typically each specimen comes with a label, and this label contains the information about the person who collected it, where they collected it, and especially the geographical location. So if a specimen is unlabeled, it means it comes with no geographical origin, no data, which should be included with the specimen. This already raises suspicion because the inclusion of this species in some entomological works that reported for the United States of America is based on one specimen that was eaten by domestic beetles who are pests. So a partially eaten specimen with no label, which in my opinion is a very poor record. And I tried looking around in museum collections, I've asked some other entomologists, but I was actually unable to find any reference for any official specimen of the white witch moth that was ever caught in the United States of America. So, if you claim that this species can be found in the United States of America, what we want to see is evidence. Evidence in the form of, in particular, a specimen that was labeled with accurate geographical data, preferably collected by a reliable and creditable entomologist. This doesn't exist. So while there are some records that claim the species was found in the United States of America before, I am very, very skeptical. And it seems that all the evidence to prove the species was found in the United States of America is wonky as best, as wonky as it could be. It kind of reminds me of these blurry, grainy Sasquatch pictures which are supposed to be proof as the existence of Bigfoot. Right, if you want to prove this species can be found up to the United States, we want to see proof. We want to see perhaps a picture, an accurate picture which doesn't exist, or a specimen with a label in a scientific collection, caught by somebody with credibility. This does not seem to occur. So the inclusion of this species for the checklist of the United States is questionable at best, which suggests there is not much evidence that this species is found in the United States, which suggests that perhaps the white witch is not found in the United States of America. That being said, would it be theoretically possible for a white witch to accidentally end up in the United States? Well, let me tell you this, the Netherlands doesn't have any native parrots, but parrots, they show up here sometimes. Maybe people release their pets, for example. But one thing that also really happens, especially with insects, as mentioned in the document before, is hitchhiking. From the tropical regions of this world, a lot of goods, think about hardwood, think about fruits and vegetables, can be transported with container ships. And together with these cargo, sometimes insects can hitchhike from tropical locations and be accidentally transported around the globe. It happens. These ships themselves also sometimes provide a refuge spot for insects, for them to hide on the ships, for example in the crevices somewhere, and only to escape on the mainland. So while it could be theoretically possible for a freak accident to happen, it would be just that, a freak accident. For example, one thing that sometimes happens is that butterflies and moths can be blown far away by jet streams or hurricanes, which are basically natural events, very improbable natural events that don't happen very frequently. And if perhaps one white witch moth, because let's be honest, they are large moths, they are powerful flyers, I could imagine that, for example, on a strong current of wind, maybe in a very rare freak accident, they could be blown by the wind and end up in places where they don't belong. They could hitchhike with cargo accidentally. That being said, even if this happens, one or a few specimens that show up in the United States, of which there is currently not much compelling evidence, but even if there was evidence in the form of pictures or photos, it's still not enough evidence to prove that the species can migrate to the United States on its own strength, by its own accord. It would be a freak accident, which is probably enabled by human cargo transport, but it wouldn't imply that white witch moths can migrate from the tropics to the United States of America. Personally, where I stand on this matter is that it probably doesn't happen. Now, some people will say, but Bart, the species is found up to Mexico, right? This is true, the species is found up to Mexico, and Mexico does share a border with the United States. But if you actually look at their distribution, you can see that the moths, they don't really come close to the border of the United States that much. It seems that the tropical species is mostly distributed in the south of Mexico, where the climate is humid and subtropical to tropical. This is where the moth actually resides, and they don't seem to come up all the way to the north of Mexico up to the US border. So there does seem to be quite a distance between the United States borders and the nearest white witch populations, which is further evidence to suggest that no, the species perhaps doesn't migrate all the way from Mexico up to the United States, which would be more reasonable to assume if they came somewhat close to the border, but this also doesn't seem to be the case. Second of all, there don't seem to be any populations of the white witch moth in the Caribbean islands. A lot of moths that reside in the Caribbean tend to, perhaps as freak accidents or perhaps also blown by strong wind currents, moths and butterflies from the Caribbean tend to have a higher probability of showing up into Florida, for example, by accident. But the fact that these moths don't have any populations in the Caribbean, as far as the records state, also is further evidence for the fact that no, this species is not a vagrant, is not a migrant that migrates to North America. Even if somebody were to find one in North America, there would need to be more evidence in the form of perhaps more specimens or seasonal patterns in the appearance and disappearance of these specimens. For example, if they would show up every year in the United States around the same season, that would be evidence to suggest the species can migrate there. One unlabeled specimen is no proof, and in my opinion, I think it's very unlikely to happen that these moths are found in the United States. I very much question every resource that mentions this. I don't think it happens. And if somebody in the future happens to find one, for example in Florida or the southern states like Texas, it's most likely a specimen that got caught in a container of a cargo ship perhaps, and perhaps made the whole journey to the United States. So far, the records don't support the existence of this species in the United States. And that's what I had to say about it. Let's move on. The moth is almost always found on the bark of white trees in good quality rainforest. White or light-colored surfaces are important to them, their survival and their camouflage. I don't think I've ever seen one on a black surface. This forest fragment here in Regua is where I commonly find these animals. And I get the impression that this is a forest species for sure, that is found in primary and more mature secondary forests. I also found them in a little bit younger secondary forest that was only several decades old after reforestation. But it seems they definitely can occur from younger disturbed forests where it's a little bit more rare. As long as the canopy is high enough, I guess, and the plant diversity is great enough. They do seem to be absent in deforested areas and scrublands though, so this leads me to the conclusion this is absolutely a forest species that needs good quality forest and preferably a somewhat high forest canopy. So this implies that although the species is thankfully still a common one, deforestation is a threat to their existence because their occurrence is bound to forest habitat. And now, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to end the debate once and for all. What is the biggest species of moth in the world? Because here I did some research and I have some data on the world's biggest species of butterflies and moths. And I'm going to prove to you that Thysania agrippina is indeed the biggest species of Lepidopteran. But before we proceed, we must address a lot of fluff around the debate. A lot of semantics. Because when we really think about it, what defines a species as the largest? It's not easy because there's several dimensions and references that you can use in order to determine size, because size, to some extent, is a little bit subjective. Believe it or not. For example, a moth has a wingspan, which is the wingspan is basically the distance from the wingtip to wingtip, which is one of the main things that are being used in records, the wingspan. But for example, there's also something such as wing surface area. Sometimes a moth with a smaller wingspan can have a bigger wing surface area. And here already the debate becomes a little bit convoluted. But there is also things such as weight, body weight. Truth is, some moths can have small wings but a very big, large and heavy body. And you'd have to ask yourself, is a moth with a bigger wingspan truly bigger than a very big, heavy moth with smaller wings? Is a moth with a very large wing surface area but slightly smaller wingspan? Is it bigger than a moth with a long wingspan but thin wings with a small surface area? But it becomes even more difficult, you see. First of all, butterflies and moths vary in size per individual. That's because the size of a butterfly or moth is determined by a lot of things. The phenotype and the genotype, for example. There are certain things in the environment that regulate the size of a butterfly or moth. For example, its diet as a caterpillar. Caterpillars sometimes have to compete over food sources. Sometimes caterpillars are capable of defoliating plants, or plants are capable of fighting back against herbivores by releasing compounds that make it more difficult for them to uptake the nutrients from the plant itself, such as phytochemicals, toxins, that can impair the caterpillar's growth. But there's also other things that can happen in the environment that can put a caterpillar under stress, such as heat waves, unusual amounts of rain, weather events that are very improbable. What I'm trying to say is that caterpillars can adapt to scarcity by adopting a smaller body size. For once and for all, I'm going to end the debate about what is the biggest species of moth in the world. I'm going to prove that the biggest species of moth is the white witch, without any doubt, Thysania agrippina. And to support this statement, I have some official data and records regarding the wingspan of the biggest butterflies and moths in the world. But before we get started, I must take some semantics out of the way. You see, online there's a lot of discussion about what is truly the biggest butterfly or moth in the world. And it turns out a lot of people have differing opinions. That's because size is actually a little bit subjective depending on how you measure it. There's a little bit of semantics involved. For example, you can measure the wing surface area of a moth, or you can measure the wingspan. The wingspan is basically the size from wingtip to wingtip. Wing surface area should be self-explanatory. But there's also other things that can be considered, such as the weight of a moth. Let me ask you a question. If one species is heavier and has a bigger wing surface area than another species, but the other species just has long and thin wings with a bigger wingspan, which species of the two is truly bigger? It already gets difficult if we think about it. That comes down to how you define size. And this is why people are arguing a lot about what is truly the biggest. Second of all, turns out that there's also averages at play. In some species, the males can be very small, but the females can be very huge. What if one species has very big females but very small males, while the other species has big males and females on average, but they're slightly smaller than the females of the other species? How do you measure that? Which one is the biggest? Species A may be bigger on average than species B, but species B may have bigger females and outsizes species A in wingspan if you only look at the females and not at the average. In this case, you can look at records. What is the record holder for the biggest specimen of any species? But then you're discarding things like averages, for example. And it gets really complicated, doesn't it? Defining what is the biggest species of moth or butterfly is actually not simple, and it comes down to some level of subjectivity and some level of mathematics. Some species are smaller than other species on average, while their biggest wingspans may actually outsize the other species, and it makes no sense, but that is how math and statistics works. Another problem is per individual, butterflies and moths, they tend to vary a lot in size, right? One of the biggest moths in the world are these Atlas moths. Atlas moths are pretty huge, but I've seen a lot of Atlas moths in my life, and some of them can get considerably smaller than some of their cousins and brothers and sisters. That's because animals aren't factory products, right? They vary in size. Pretty much any animal varies in size. Just look at people. There's short people, there's long people, there's thin and skinny people, there's fat people. So if you want to say how big is a human in general, and is a human bigger than, for example, what's something that's similar to the size of human? For example, is a human bigger than, for example, a wolf, right? In terms of height, for example, humans could be bigger. But maybe in terms of weight and muscles, the wolf is bigger. Now this is just something I made up. I don't know if humans and wolves are actually bigger, but this is just, it shows how much subjectivity there is involved, and this is actually a difficult thing to say with a measure of objectivity, right? For example, some species say that wing surface area is more important than wingspan, and that a species with a big wing surface area is bigger than another species with longer wings. And it just kind of dilutes the debate because it becomes harder and harder to quantify what is truly the biggest. Caterpillars also have very difficult lives. They have to compete for food. Sometimes there is a scarcity in food and they kind of starve. Caterpillars can sometimes defoliate their host plant, but sometimes host plant can get sick and have little nutrients for the caterpillars. If there is a lot of drought, the plants have a low water content, which will also affect the moth size, because water content of the leaves is one of the limiting factors of size in Lepidopterans. So it's things like nutrients. If a caterpillar gets sick, its growth will also be impaired and tends to produce smaller individuals. Temperatures also play a role. There's a lot of things in the environment, such as stress, a lack of food, a lack of nutrients, and illness that can cause caterpillars to grow into smaller individuals than average, right? There's also things like genetics. Some populations of moths of the same species are bigger in one country than they are in another country. For example, a species of moth on an island may be smaller than its cousin on the mainland, because islands, for example, tend to produce differently sized individuals, even if they're the same species. So how do you measure the true size of a butterfly or moth? That, my friends, is a little bit subjective and difficult. Either way, I am now going to read the official data that I was able to gather from various sources about the wingspan of Lepidopterans. And personally, I am going to define the biggest Lepidoptera in terms of wingspan. I'm not going to look at weight. I'm not going to look at wing surface area, because in my opinion, the wingtip to wingtip, the wingspan, should be the true and universal measurement of the size of any Lepidopteran. And adding any extra factors just adds a lot of subjectivity. I think wingspan is how it was traditionally done and how it should be done. So, let's get started. So here is the top 5 of the biggest butterflies and moths in the world that I could find. I did some of my own research and looked at some publications and resources. But I also have some scientific references. And the best reference I could find was from the Department of Entomology and Nematology, from the Book of Insect Records, Chapter 32, the largest Lepidoptera wingspan, which actually includes some publications and citations as well. So that's good. It means that I have some evidence to back up the things that I say. Number 5, the species that I could find, was surprisingly the Hercules moth, Coscinocera hercules. Turns out that its wingspan is up to 230 millimeters. That is what I could find. Now, a lot of people think that the Hercules moth is one of the biggest species in the world. It is, but it seems that it is not bigger than species like the Atlas moth, for example. Still, it's a respectably large moth with, again, a big wing surface area. And it's still what it seems like about the fifth biggest specimen, the fifth biggest species of Lepidoptera in the world. At number 4 comes, surprisingly, a butterfly, Ornithoptera alexandria. The maximum wingspan of a butterfly is found in the birdwing Ornithoptera alexandria, or Queen Alexandra's birdwing. Females of this uncommon species, occupying a restricted range in Papua New Guinea, can attain a wingspan exceeding 250 millimeters or 25 centimeters. Wow! That, my friends, is quite impressive, isn't it? Number 3. Attacus kaiser. Attacus kaiser from the Philippines. This species is reported to have a wingspread of about 10 inches or up to 255 millimeters. That is quite a large moth, isn't it? Up to 255 millimeters. And there's 2 publications, one by Folsen and one by Frost, that have been mentioned here in the references that support these wing measurements. The second biggest Lepidoptera in the world, and this should not come as a surprise, the second biggest appears to be the Atlas moth. And in this case, picture reference of a specimen with a wingspan of 262 millimeter. So yes, Attacus atlas, a species from Asia that is found in mainland Asia, is quite widespread, is one of the biggest moths in the world, and in this case I also have picture evidence to back up what I'm saying. You can look at the specimen yourself and see the depicted wingspan. So, and this particular specimen seems to be in the collection of a person called Peter Lillywhite and was collected in Java, Indonesia. Perhaps one of the biggest specimens collected so far. I wonder if there are specimens out there that are even bigger. Probably yes, although you'd have to be really lucky to collect them. That really is a whopper of an insect. So, that was the top 5 biggest Lepidopterans so far. But wait, number 1 is missing. That's because number 1 is Thysania agrippina, or the white witch. And to show you that the difference between the biggest moths in the world is no contest for the white witch, turns out I found a picture of one of the record-holding specimens of the white witch with the biggest wingspan so far, which is a wingspan of 298 millimeter. 298 millimeter is incredibly large, it's almost 30 centimeter in size. And without further ado, let me actually show you the specimen right now. Da 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 da. So this answers the next question. Is this really the biggest moth on Earth? And the answer is yes. In terms of wingspan, this is absolutely, indisputably the largest moth. And today I'm going to prove it to you. In conclusion, if you think that there is another species of moth that could be bigger than the white witch, bring me some evidence, huh? Evidence in the form of a picture depicting the wingspan. That would be fantastic. There's so much speculation online and discussion about what is the biggest Lepidopteran, but very little pictures. If you have pictures of the wingspans of Atlas moths, Hercules moths, even Alexandra butterfly, birdwing butterflies, please email the pictures to me. I would love to see your specimens in collections, and maybe I can talk about them on YouTube someday. Literally, send me your records. Send me the biggest butterfly or moth in your collection. I would love to take a look at all your pictures. And maybe I can use the data for research later. Supposedly, this specimen right here is the world record holder right now. Of course, I have to say, not every white witch moth is this large. They actually seem to vary a lot per individual.
But this is proof that it is the undisputed king. No other Lepidopteran can come close to this size. This specimen is from Santa Catarina in Brazil. And here is the proof that all of you have been asking for years. In terms of wingspan, it is absolutely the largest moth in the world. Nothing comes close in terms of wingspan. This is almost 300 millimeters or 30 centimeters. And if you disagree, well, please show me a picture of a moth with a larger wingspan than this. To my knowledge, it is one of the largest specimens of moths that have been recorded so far. Interesting.
While making this list, I found an interesting observation. And it is that pretty much all the biggest species of Lepidopteran in the world are somewhat similar in size. All of them seem to come close to about 250 millimeter in wingspan. Both the Hercules moth, both Alexandra's Queen Alexandra's birdwing butterfly, both Attacus Kaiser and Attacus atlas seem to come close to about 250 millimeter in wingspan. And to be honest, the differences between most of the species on the list are not that big, if you think about it. The difference between some of them is like 10 or 20 millimeter only. What does that mean? That means that if someone else finds a new record-holding specimen of any of these species, and it's just about 1 centimeter bigger than the previous one, it could move up the list, right? For example, the Hercules moth. If somebody finds a Hercules moth with a wingspan like of up to 250, 260 millimeter, I don't know if that is possible, but it wouldn't be a massive difference. And that would significantly move it up the list. And like I said, the problem with Lepidopterans is they vary per individual. So you get small individuals and you get exceptionally big individuals. And one of these unusual giants, if you just catch one of them, it could change the status of a species as the current record holder. For example, the difference I could find between Ornithoptera alexandria and Attacus Kaiser is about 5 millimeter. So if somebody finds in their collection an unusually big Attacus Kaiser or unusually big Alexandria butterfly, they could switch places in the list very easily based on one unusually big specimen. However, none of them have ever come close to the wingspan of the white witch, which is almost 300 millimeter. So, in conclusion, the wingspan of almost all the biggest butterflies and moths in the world is quite similar, except for the white witch, which is the record holder significantly bigger than any of the other ones. The Atlas moth doesn't even come close to 300 millimeter. Attacus Kaiser doesn't even come close to 300 millimeter. Queen Alexandra's birdwing butterfly doesn't even come close to 300 millimeter, and neither does the Hercules moth. It's not a contest. The white witch is the biggest species of flying Lepidopteran in the world. Now, I do want to say that the picture that you just saw is a picture of the world record holder, presumably. The average white witch seems to be in the range, at least from the ones I found in the wild. I measured some of them in the wild, and they seem to have like their wingspans average around 250, 260 millimeters. But it does seem their wingspan is very, very variable, and it's possible to catch giants in some cases that are much bigger than many of the other white witches that you'll encounter. So to find a record holder like this, you would have to catch and measure many moth individuals. And who knows, maybe even bigger specimens are out there in the jungle that no one has ever measured yet. I mean, this one is 2 millimeters away from being 30 centimeters. I'm pretty sure there are some specimens out there that could be even bigger.
because there's not that many people who collect and measure moths. So the samples we have from captivity is only a tiny sample from what's really out there in the wild. But let this video finally end the debate with picture evidence. And while some people would like to include things like wing surface area, because they say, well, the Atlas moth has a bigger wing surface area than the white witch, so it looks bigger. I don't care. Since when is wing surface area relevant, right? By adding more, traditionally it's always been wingspan, and by convoluting the data and making it more subjective, I suppose, the debate becomes more difficult. And maybe even impossible to solve, right? Because when you add semantics to something, a lot of it becomes subjective. For most organisms that can fly, it's measured in terms of wingspan at least. So, yeah. That being said, if we think about it, maybe it's a little bit of a stupid discussion to take very seriously, considering the fact that pretty much all the biggest butterflies and moths in the world are similar in size. The difference is not that huge. The difference between Queen Alexandra's birdwing and an Atlas moth and a white witch moth is not massive. And if you take random individuals of each species, I bet you'll see a lot of overlap. You'll see a lot of Alexandra's birdwings that are bigger than white witches. You'll see a lot of white witches that are smaller than Atlas moths. So that's because some of them are big, some of them are small, they all vary. But if you take the biggest, the world record holders, you'll see that the most other species don't come close to the record holding biggest white witch specimens that have been found. But considering how similar all of them are, and considering it comes down to averages, not individuals, it is a little bit of a stupid discussion to take too seriously, in my opinion. All of them are big, all of them are beautiful. And while it's interesting to know what is the biggest flying insect on our planet, it's definitely something to think about, that is cool. I wouldn't take it too seriously, because, hey, they're moths, they're not Pokemon. So yeah, it doesn't have to be like a measuring contest for everything, right? All of them are pretty big and impressive in their own regard. So there you go. And if you want to take that so seriously, to have a whole online debate about it and fight each other over what is the biggest species, I think that kind of defeats the purpose. But looking at these records and publications and references that I could find, it's definitely true. The white witch is the biggest moth by a decent amount. And number 2, 3 and number 4, 5 on the list, they don't even come close to the biggest white witches. So the white witch is huge. Last but not least, do you have a record of a giant butterfly or moth that you think is special? You could send it to me on my email, bart.coppens@hotmail.com. I will definitely take a look at it. I think there's the possibility that out there in the wild, there could be even bigger white witches that have a bigger wingspan than this specimen. It probably involves people looking around in the wild, measuring various specimens to see if they can break the world record of this specimen. But this settles the debate for me. The white witch is the biggest species of butterfly or moth in the world. Fantastic creatures, aren't they? I'm going to make many close-ups so you can enjoy them in high definition on my channel. And now some observations. Most of the specimens that I caught actually came close to a wingspan of 24 to 26 centimeters or 240 millimeter to 260 millimeter. Although in some exceptions I found larger specimens. While this is certainly large, it is nothing close to the world record holding specimen from Brazil I showed you before. It could be that there is a lot of intraspecific size variation, and to find an absolute monster that approaches 30 centimeters, you need a lot of luck. Think of it like fishing. A lot of fishermen are constantly looking for the world record of a particular type of fish. You'd have to measure the size of a lot of moths to find one that is this large. Still, I'm happy to see them up close for once. Not many people get this opportunity in their life. I am one of the lucky ones. Therefore, I would also like to thank everyone from the bottom of my heart who has donated to my channel in the past. I am the owner of the biggest butterfly and moth YouTube channel that currently exists. But it is hard for me to travel the world and show you unusual species because I am demonetized by YouTube. Traveling costs a lot of time and money. The only reason I was able to afford the flight ticket to Brazil was because some of my fans donated money to my channel. Otherwise, this video would not exist. YouTube does not support me and my show, sadly, despite the fact that we do rainforest conservation and even reforestation. Sadly, they do not pay me for the views that my channel gets. It is only the crowdfunding and the donations that make my videos possible. So thank you guys. Thank you so much for giving me this opportunity after all these years. Together, me and my community, we will conquer the world of butterflies and moths. We are on top right now. From the bottom of my heart, thank you guys so much. You changed my life. Let's proceed and take a closer look at these animals. Curiously, the underside of the moth is also very noteworthy. Interestingly, if you look closely, sometimes there is a blue metallic iridescence to it. The grey pattern with white stripes is interesting to me as well, and I wonder if it's a form of mimicry. You see, I noticed an interesting similarity between the wings of some birds of prey and the underside of the wings of the white witch moth. Now, of course, a similarity does not instantly make it mimicry, but it could make sense. Looking like a bird of prey in flight would look in theory like a bird of prey, and that could certainly demotivate certain species of birds from attacking them. Of course, it could be a case of convergent evolutions for other reasons too. Or perhaps the similarity is nothing but a coincidence. But can you notice the similarity? What also makes this theory interesting is the fact that they don't really show the underside of their wings at all during the day, unless they are disturbed and forced to fly away from a potential threat. Of course, I'm just brainstorming here. I could be completely wrong. So take this with a grain of salt. This is nothing but speculation, just food for thought. Nothing too scientific, but worthy to point it out anyway. If I am right, however, and perhaps I am not right, I could be completely wrong. But if hypothetically I am correct in this situation, then I think I am the first person to point this out. Or at least the first person to notice the similarity or publish it on a public platform. Hey, not that that would be a big deal, but it would be interesting.
One of the interesting things about the white witch is that its host plant and its life cycle are a 300-year-old mystery to science. And we don't really know anything about this insect, its life history or its ecology. And that's very strange if you think about it, because digest this information for a second. We don't know the life cycle of the world's biggest moth. It is a mystery to science. We don't know what it eats, how it lives. We don't know its developmental stages. And that, my friends, is intriguing, weird, and also a little bit saddening. Now, some of you may ask yourself the question of how is this possible, you know? There's a lot of information available about butterflies and moths nowadays. And there's a lot of biologists working on them. I know moths are still not the most popular animals in the whole world right now that get the most attention. But from my experience, the attention that we give to insects and their services in the ecosystem has been increasing, you know? I definitely notice more people taking up an interest in biology, even as hobbyists or amateur or as professional scientists, doesn't matter. So considering that, and considering the fact it has been a mystery for 300 years, it is a very noticeable species. Perhaps it is the biggest species of moth in the world, so it gets more attention than any other moth. And the fact its life history has been a mystery for 300 years, should lead you to the question, why? Why is it a mystery? How is it possible? I think I have the answer to that question. So one of the things that you guys should realize is if you want to find out the life cycle of any butterfly or moth, is the first thing you have to do is you have to locate the place where it breeds. In particular, you have to locate the plants that the caterpillars eat, and you'll have to go out and prove that larvae are present on the host plant, that they are feeding from the host plant, or that adults are depositing eggs on said host plant. Now in theory this sounds very easy, but in practice there is one complication, and this is just a theory, this is just a conjecture, but I think the reason why nobody has managed to find the host plant and the caterpillars is because this species is a canopy species. What is a canopy? The canopy is typically referred to as the crown, the upper crown of the trees. And when we are talking about tropical rainforest, the canopy can be incredibly high. In fact, in Brazil I've observed canopies as high as 15 to maybe 20 meters or higher. It is not as simple as my country in the Netherlands, where you can easily, or at least more easily, study forest crown insects, because a tropical rainforest canopy is almost a very complicated ecosystem by itself, consisting of vines, epiphytic plants, consisting of several layers of tree communities with a very high biodiversity. Last but not least, it is simply so high that it is out of reach. If you don't believe me, let me show you the place where I found the most white witch moth in Brazil. It was a forest fragment with a small trail where I very commonly found white witch moth sitting on the tree trunks. Let me show you what it looks like. Look at how high the trees here even are. Now imagine that these moths or their caterpillars are hidden somewhere in the treetops in the forest canopy. How are we going to find out? It's almost impossible. It's like a cathedral, it's like high-rise. The trees here are like skyscrapers, and reaching the treetops here is incredibly difficult due to the dense, thick and very high vegetation. It's almost impossible. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, that forest where you just saw me walking around with a net is where I was looking for white witch moths. And looking up into the trees, I suddenly understand why this is a 300-year-old mystery to science, why we don't know anything about the white witch moth. It's very simple. The canopy of tropical rainforest ecosystems is very inaccessible and very difficult to study. Second of all, there is a problem with the fact that a lot of Lepidopterans are host plant specialists. If you watch my channel for a long time, some of you guys will already know the information that a lot of butterflies and moths, they specialize in laying their eggs on perhaps just one or two different species of plants. The caterpillars often refuse to starve before even considering eating another plant that is not their host plant. So that means that somewhere in this giant, enormous, gigantic rainforest somewhere, there could be one or two species of plant that the moth specializes in. Now, if you were to randomly look in the plants, hoping to find the caterpillars, I would say good luck. There's over 20,000 species of vascular plants described in the Brazilian Atlantic rainforest. And this is not taking into account the species is not just found in the Atlantic rainforest, it's also found in the Amazon rainforest and Central American rainforests, which are subtropical. The thing is, looking for the host plant of a caterpillar, of a butterfly or moth, often really depends on complete trial and error. And the thing is, trial and error can work in certain environments, you know. For example, here in Europe, where I live in the Netherlands, there's not that many species of plants or trees. You could systematically try to rule out species that they don't use as host plant, and then you're left with a small amount of options that could be an educated guess. The
Thing is, even if we right now make an educated guess about what kind of plants the species could potentially eat and where the caterpillars lay their eggs, you're still left with thousands of plants, some of which may be impossible to locate, some of which may have trees that are so high they're completely out of reach, you would have to find a young tree. Some of these trees grow in the heart of the forest, which is very inaccessible primary rainforest. A lot of them can be vines that grow in the crown of the tree. Good luck getting up there in those trees just to pick some leaves. Just to hope the caterpillars just happen to be there. Like, it's possible, but you probably have more chances of winning the lottery than randomly having access to a primary forest canopy in which the white witch could breed, of which we are not even sure, by the way. We cannot even verify it. But it would surely explain why this is a 300-year-old entomological mystery. Accessing such a place for study is just almost impossible. It's dangerous, it's hard to do, and it would be like finding a needle in a haystack. Rainforest ecosystems have thousands of plants. 1 square kilometer of rainforest in Brazil has probably more species of plants that are present in my entire country. And the sheer diversity and inaccessibility of the vegetation, plus the fact that we don't even really know where they lay their eggs, it would make it a complete random guess. So, and this is what makes this a very intriguing, but also very difficult to solve entomological mystery. Second of all, what I also find very interesting is my impression in the rainforests of Brazil is that the white witch is not a rare species. Like, yeah, I would classify it as uncommon, but not rare. I've been in Brazil for 7 weeks, and in 7 weeks' time I walked a lot of forest trails. I've probably encountered more than a dozen of individuals of the white witch. Interestingly, they do all seem to hang out in predetermined locations, like if there is one particular spot where you see a white witch and you remove the specimen and you come back a few days later, you can find a new individual here in the same spot. So they do seem to be picky in about what small pockets of forest they like to hang out. There's places where I found 0 white witches, and there's places where I would commonly see them on the tree trunks. In this video, the small forest fragment, I saw 4 of them in one day, but all of them were hanging around in a small area around the trees. But the real question is, does reproduction of this species occur anywhere? Or, to put it more simply, does this species breed in all sorts of places or not? What does this mean? You see, the white witch is a rather large species of moth, and presumably based on its powerful flight, based on its large wings, based on the speed and efficiency at which it flies, it's reasonable to assume the species is capable of traversing large distances should it choose to do so. Now, and the thing is, a lot of people assume that reproduction occurs in every place where the moths occur. However, a lot of butterflies and moths are known to occur over a large surface area, but only reproduce in a small particular places in this particular surface area. So what I'm trying to say with a lot of convoluted words is that perhaps the places where this species likes to breed or lay their eggs could be actually very localized. And it could be, and this is just a theory, right? I could be wrong, but the possibility exists that these moths can fly large distances or migrate to particular breeding grounds that they like. And if this were to be the case, and if I were to be correct in this case, which there's no evidence, I could be wrong, right? But if this species is very picky about where it lays its eggs, and it actually doesn't breed in all the forests where you can find it in real life, that would make finding it even more difficult. Because to an entomologist,
The fact that a species could be, that the white witch can be common in a particular forest would give you the impression that the moths are also breeding there in the direct area, leading you to search the direct area, or giving you the suspicion that this host plant must be nearby because the moths are nearby. But there is some evidence that the moths have a long lifespan, that they perhaps can live for several months in the wild. If that were to be the case, I can totally imagine that maybe the host plant that they use, or the place where they lay eggs, could actually be a very localized place that they migrate to, or at least spend a lot of time looking for, or at least can traverse large distances for in order to find this little place. And as somebody who is very interested in biology and who studies a lot of biology, examples of this are actually not that uncommon. I would like to present you the common eel. The common eel is what many people consider to be a very tasty fish, even a delicacy, and its distribution around the world is very large, right? You can catch common eels in a lot of places around the world. However, what's interesting is that the reproduction of the eel, where it breeds and its breeding habits, in the past used to be a mystery to science as well. And I believe this mystery was over 100 years old. So it took people over 100 years to figure out why the common eel, where they reproduce, because it was a mystery. As somebody who is very interested in biology and reads a lot of biology, examples of this can be common. And they can commonly present a mystery in the life history of a particular animal. In particular, I would like to talk to you about what is called the European eel, Anguilla anguilla. Now, this fish was and still is very commonly eaten. Some people consider it a delicacy. They are said to taste really good. And what's interesting is that fishermen can catch these eels in a very large number of places, right? We can show you perhaps a map of the distribution, from which we can deduce that the eel is or was a fish that was relatively common with a very big distribution. However, the reproduction of this animal was a mystery to science for over a century. So you have here this very common fish that you can catch in almost anywhere, so it seems, but we don't know how exactly it breeds and where. So why was this a mystery to science? Why could biologists not figure out where and why eels reproduce, right? It's strange to think that something that is so common, that we eat by the millions, that is on the dinner table of millions of people, is not understood to biology. For over a century we didn't know how eels were capable of breeding and how they did it. So it turns out that pretty much all the eels, all of them migrate to a small area. I believe it's the Sargasso Sea. And the reproduction of this fish only takes place in this particular location. This led many biologists astray, because when a species is widely distributed over a large area, but its reproduction only actually takes place in a very small area, that place is actually very difficult to pinpoint, because it's very complicated to deduce where to even start looking when a species is very widespread, right? With some species of animals, they can reproduce everywhere where they occur. And when you spot the species itself, you can deduce that somewhere in your local environment it must be reproducing itself. But this cannot always be said. And some species of butterfly and moth do the same. Some of them migrate to particular areas to reproduce, and then the second generation of butterflies, it migrates away to another place to, for example, to hibernate or to find a new habitat to reproduce. And that means that not everywhere where the insect is encountered means that it is a place where it is also reproducing, right? Am I saying that the same is going on for the white witch?
Do I think that white witches have migrations and perhaps they are breeding in very localized spots? Well, all of this is just speculation and educated guess. They do seem to very easily lay eggs in captivity, so there's that. But I do think there is evidence to suggest that white witches, given their long wingspan, right, and their long lifespan, the fact that they live long, have long wings, they are very agile and nimble flyers, those three things point towards the fact that the insect is at least allowed to be picky, right, about its preferences. When we look at things like large silk moths, the Saturniidae, we notice that they are moths that have no functional mouth parts. They cannot feed, their lifespan is very limited, and they have to conserve energy. And therefore, the females of these species, they barely fly at all, in fact. Silk moths tend to deposit eggs very close to where they eclose from the cocoon. They have very localized populations because their ability to migrate or travel large distances is severely impacted, severely limited due to their short lifespans and the fact they have to conserve energy. The white witch is capable of feeding, is perhaps capable of living for a long time. They are definitely capable of flying large distances. Now, this does not imply that there's migrations taking place all over the continent, but it does mean that if you see this species distributed over a large forest, a large surface area, that within this large surface area there could be only a few particular localized spots where they are breeding. And I think this is a strong possibility, based on the morphology of the insect, based on the fact that they have long lifespans. It tends to be that the longer the lifespan of a butterfly or moth, the less they are in a hurry to reproduce, the more surface area they can cover in their lifetime, the more picky they're allowed to be about a microhabitat where they can deposit eggs or larvae. So I think that it is very possible that maybe its host plant, or at least the place where it chooses to lay eggs and breed, could be, and I'm not saying it has to be, but I'm saying that there is a strong possibility they breed and lay eggs in very small localized places. It could be a particular type of host plant that is maybe a little bit scarce, that is not commonly available. Maybe the host plant has to be in a particular condition. Some species don't like laying eggs on young trees, while others they prefer young trees. Some caterpillars prefer young leaves, some prefer old leaves. Butterflies and moths sometimes also have demands not only when it comes to the species of host plant, but in what location it is growing and in what condition the host plant is. Considering this species is probably allowed to have stronger preferences when it comes to its host plant due to a potential long lifespan and the fact it's a very agile flyer that could very easily cover a lot of surface area in search of the perfect place to lay eggs, because it can afford this. It can afford to lay eggs in the perfect place. Given this information, I think there is a good possibility that at least the species may not be reproducing itself in every place where it occurs. That's just speculation, that's just a conjecture. But I imagine that not in every place where you find specimens, it necessarily means that they are breeding there, that there's also larvae and host plant present. I think it's possible for white witches to occur in places where there are no host plant available. And it's possible that they trek through these places, or maybe even temporarily use them as territories, while passing by to different places. But I could be completely wrong, of course. I could be completely, totally and entirely wrong in this case scenario, of course, because we don't know anything about it. So anything I say is just speculation at this point. It's very much possible that all of them are breeding in the places where they occur, but I think it's more likely that they don't, or at least they have some
some degree of pickiness to them, some degree of selectivity to where they may deposit eggs, for example. And I think it's very likely that if they do it, it's bound to happen in the forest canopy. That's my personal thoughts on the matter. Recently, however, there was good news, because there was a claim that somebody in Brazil found for the first time the caterpillar of the white witch butterfly. And his name in the record is Fernando Carvalho Filho, and he claims to have found a very large white caterpillar in Brazil, and upon capturing it, the caterpillar pupated and turned into a white witch moth. And the picture of this larva I can show you right now. This, ladies and gentlemen, is the world's first record of the caterpillar of a white witch moth. And this is actually a very unusual and rare record, because it is actually the first depiction of a fully grown larva that is in 300 years' time, as far as we know. However, there was some bad news. The caterpillar was not found on its host plant. The thing is that before caterpillars, when they are fully grown and before they want to pupate, they initiate what is called the wandering phase. And in this phase, the caterpillars start wandering down in the vegetation looking for a place to spin a cocoon. And this was most likely what was going on with this caterpillar. When they start wandering, they tend to come down from the trees, from the host plant, and that's when most of them are actually found by humans. Most of the time when people record the larva of like a saturnid moth or a big rabbit or even a hawk moth, most of the time it's in the prepupal phase, in the wandering phase, in which they just wander around on the floor looking for a place to spin a cocoon. This is unfortunate because it means the host plant is still a mystery to science, despite the fact somebody has seen and recorded the caterpillar. It was not found on the plant that it eats. Damn, so close and yet so far. But it is good, and it seems the morphology was consistent with the genus Thysania. So we can say that at least now there is a reference, at least something we can compare to future records to say, well, this is the caterpillar of the white witch. So the caterpillar is known to science. That's fantastic news. But we still really don't know the life cycle and the ecology. One thing that we can do, however, is we can make an educated guess about what it potentially eats. You see, there's a small magic trick when it comes to finding the host plants of butterflies and moths, and it's looking at their relatives. Those of you who are more deeply into the ecology of butterflies and moths will know that if you look at one genus of butterfly or moth, that all the species in the genus are typically bound to, at least most of the time, utilize similar host plants. I can name two butterflies from my country, Aglaeus urticae, the tortoiseshell, and Aglaeus io, the peacock butterfly. Both of them, for example, use stinging nettles, right? Sometimes it's more complicated than this, it's a bit of an oversimplification. But I can think of a lot of genera, or I can come up easily with a genus of insect in which most of its members eat similar plants. Another example would be the genus Manduca, for example the hornworms that you commonly find in the United States of America. There's a lot of species in the genus Manduca, but almost all of them use solanaceous plants as host plants, which are nightshades, for example. So if a new species of Manduca was discovered, for example, we can reasonably deduce what it eats is most likely something related to nightshades. And that narrows down the options a little bit. So it does seem that the white witch, Thysania agrippina, has a sister species. It's called the Thysania zenobia. And reportedly is found from the United States of America all the way down to Brazil, which is also a large distribution. And the host plant of this species is known to science. Thysania zenobia caterpillars are recorded to science, and they have been recorded on the host plants Cassia and Senna. That is very interesting information, because what it means is that this species of which uses Cassia and Senna So it means that there is a probability, at least there is a logical assumption that you can make that a white witch can eat something similar, right? It doesn't have to be the same plants, but it could most likely be related plants, or at least from this family of plants, the Fabaceae. That is an interesting observation, and that leads a lot of entomologists to believe that if the white witch host plant was discovered, it is most likely to be a member of the Fabaceae family. You know, it's the pea family. It's related to Acacia, Albizia, Mimosa. So I think that is actually quite interesting to think about. And the discovery of the host plant of this species, it means that if somebody were to find the caterpillars of the white witch or their eggs, and they want to experiment with what the caterpillars can eat, it would be a nice educated guess to feed the caterpillars fabaceous plants that are related to Cassia or Senna, or are maybe even from the same genus, Cassia or Senna. It's interesting that an 18th century painting exists illustrating the life cycle of this moth, although many entomologists who've had a look at it came to the conclusion that maybe the person who painted this, Maria Sibylla Merian, although a very talented and famous entomologist for her own time, may have been wrong when it comes to this life history, because no records of the larva were published afterwards, and she probably confused the larva of the white witch with the larva of another species. Especially now that we have the real picture of the caterpillar of a white witch that was confirmed. If we compare the morphology of the larva, we see that it doesn't add up, which is more evidence that perhaps she confused another species of moth with the larva of the white witch. Nonetheless, I think it was interesting to point out. Last but not least, some of you guys may be wondering, Bart, didn't you try any host plants out for these moths themselves? And for that I can say that yes, I tried to breed these moths. And I came to one conclusion. It is laughably easy to obtain eggs from them. If you happen to catch a female and you contain her in a large enclosure, use a large one because the moths are large and they like space, and consistently feed her with fruit juice that contains sugar. I used guava juice that was diluted with water, and I added a little bit of white sugar. And I was able to keep females alive for over 5 weeks. And upon keeping the specimens alive in captivity, they started laying eggs relatively easy. If you catch a wild female and take care of her, she will lay eggs in a span of just a few days. And what's even more interesting is that her eggs will also hatch very fast. I think the eggs of the white witch for me, they hatched in about 4 to 5 days, which is very rapid for a moth that large. And I'm happy to say I conducted my own host plant experiment. I'm going to spoil the result in advance. I tested hundreds of plants and the caterpillars refused to eat anything I could find. Anything. Yeah. So at least I gave it my own shot. If you want footage of this, I have some to share. I took eggs of the moth and they hatched into baby white witch caterpillars. I placed them in a plastic container with a lot of leaves of various plants and tried to see if they would eat anything. Let me show you what I did. And now, ladies and gentlemen, it is time to put my theory to the test. You see, the first baby white witches have been hatching. Can you see them in this container? These wriggling little worms are the babies of the Thysania agrippina, the world's biggest moth. Here I have a collection of plants, which I suspect could be potential host plants, but I could be wrong. And my experiment will consist of feeding the larvae the plants I think could be the host plant and seeing if they live or starve. It's a crude experiment, but it's what entomology is like sometimes. So let's give it a try.
Since the caterpillars are most likely in the wild a canopy species, they are extremely fast. This is what you see with other rabbits too that live high in the trees. Like Catocala, the caterpillars can run very, very, very fast. And the first thing that they'll do is try to find a high point. Can you see how crazy hyperactive these are? These are the first instar of the White Witch and they've been set free. And right now they're spreading all over the vegetation. All over the vegetation. Some of them running out of the box, but don't worry, I'll make sure they don't escape.
Well, that's it, ladies and gentlemen. I tried. I gave it my best shot. But I realized this problem is much harder than I imagined. Seeing the sheer biodiversity of the plants there in Brazil. The fact that in the canopy there was a lot of plants I thought could be the house plant, but I couldn't reach them because the trees are way too high. It made me realize how difficult to solve this problem could be. It's very difficult sometimes to find a young tree with leaves you can actually pick of the type of plant that you would like to try as a house plant. It's a logistical nightmare. I tried many plants and shrubs, and the caterpillars, they just refuse to touch any of the plants. Unfortunately, but it was worth a try, and at least now we can say, look, here's some footage of the caterpillars of the White Witch, which I didn't have on my channel before, even if it's just the first instar. Now I think there was one clue, and I think the fact that females lay eggs that easily and readily in captivity, it means that in the wild, although this is a conjecture, maybe they are picky about laying eggs in the wild and not in captivity. But it does seem that the moths are very ready to lay eggs in any given situation. And a lot of rabbits are much harder to get to deposit their eggs from. Actually, it was one of the easiest rabbits I tried to make lay eggs ever. Which makes me suspect that perhaps the species is breeding more in the localized area than that they could be migrating away to another place. Because species who are very picky about egg laying conditions, they usually don't just randomly lay hundreds of eggs in captivity. Species who are really picky about host plants and the microhabitat where the host plant grows, they don't pump out hundreds of eggs at any given time. But again, this is a conjecture, and what happens in captivity doesn't always represent what happens in the wild. But I think it's a clue that the species is breeding in the local area where I caught them. So yeah, that was my own experiment. No host plant was found. This leads me to another strange observation that I would like to share to you. First of all I try to take care of these moths in captivity in order to study them and find out more about their biology, their life history, their ecology. Now, I wasn't as arrogant to expect to solve the mystery in my first time that I ever was in Brazil. A 300-year-old mystery that many competent entomologists try to solve. I'm not as arrogant to think that I would be the first to solve it, but it's nice to give it a try. And in captivity, I like to give the moth sugar water. They like to drink a lot, they're very hungry moths. So I gave them a mix with guava juice and white sugar diluted with water. And the moths would drink from a bottle cap, and I would like to show you some footage of that. It's very interesting to look at, but it also comes with a few interesting observations. So let me show you the White Witch feeding in captivity.
Exclusive footage of the White Witch drinking fruit juice from a bottle cap as a close-up. This is some really special footage, people. I hope you enjoy watching this. Because some of you insect nerds have been begging me to film this insect for over 7 years, and today is finally the day. I can offer you the video footage that you have dreamed of. White witches drinking fruit juice. So I added a little bit of guava juice, white sugar, and then diluted it with water and poured it in bottle caps, and it seemed to work wonders. These moths were hungry and loving the food I made for them. So I caught these animals and harassed these animals a little in order to make this video, so I wanted to make things right by offering them something in return for their stress. Free food, and they surely seem to appreciate the gesture. What is interesting is that the moths make rather unusual motions with their proboscis. They swipe their proboscis from left to right. And while I have seen other moths make similar motions when drinking fruit juice or tree sap, this behavior is a little bit extreme in the white witch. I wonder why. They seem to really make strong jerking motions. Perhaps it has to do with their size. The moths can drink for a long time. I suppose that moths this big need to be able to eat a lot of food to sustain themselves. Some of them can drink 5 to 7 minutes straight. The mouth parts of Lepidoptera mainly consist of the sucking kind. This part is known as the proboscis. And the proboscis consists of two tubes held together by hooks. The proboscis contains muscles for operating. Each tube is inwardly concave, thus forming a central tube through which moisture is sucked up. Suction takes place due to the contraction and the expansion of a sac in the head. In captivity, the moths would not feed automatically. I had to manually bring the food close to their mouth for them to even recognize it as food and then start feeding. So this footage could prove to be interesting when researching the feeding habits of this species.
This led me to a very interesting observation. Of course, the way the proboscis moves when it feeds is kind of unusual, but I wouldn't look too much into it. I mean, they're trying to feed from a bottle cap, which is unnatural. Although the motions that their proboscis make is not something I observe in other species that much. Actually, never. It's the first time I see a moth move its proboscis like that in a swiping motion. And it got me thinking, what do these moths actually feed on in the wild? So I started digging into literature, and a lot of sources suggest that the white witch moth feeds on overripe fruit. For example, ripe, fermenting, rotting fruit that falls to the forest floor. And this is what moths from this group, the witch moths, typically feed on. However, let me tell you something. There is another species of witch moth in Brazil that I was, just trying to study a little because I'm interested in the subject. This moth is called not the white witch, but the black witch, Ascaphala odorata. And the black witch is another species I'm interested in looking at. So I got a bright idea to bait the black witch using fermented rotting fruits, in particular bananas. And now this is going to take a few minutes to watch, but I would really like you to look at the footage and think together with me to see some of the observations, because this is something I would like to share. Now, the one thing I want you to know is that the black witch is a relative of the white witch, right? Both of them are not the same, have different ecology, but it is a little bit comparable, especially when it comes to their supposed feeding habits, their fondness for ripe or fermenting fruits. So I attracted those. Ladies and gentlemen, I have traveled to Brazil to join a conservation project named Regua. I will be studying butterflies and moths here as a researcher. I even have my own research accommodation here. But one of the moths in this forest that you really want to have to see is a giant that doesn't easily reveal itself. It is the black witch. Superstitious people are even afraid of it, saying that its appearance is perhaps a bad omen. So, how do we see this black witch? Well, there are several ways that we can use to attract moths, such as using a light trap at night. However, the black witch is often not fooled by artificial light. In fact, the species is notorious for rarely coming to any moth trap. But they do have a soft spot for rotting, fermenting fruit. You see, these very large moths have a proboscis and need to eat a lot of food to sustain their large bodies. And therefore, we've placed some fruit here. It's rotting bananas. Now tonight I'm going to be watching over these rotting, fermenting fruits, which should be perfect food for the black witch. And let's see if we can lure the queen of the jungle with these rotting bananas tonight.
Finding the animals we want always takes a little bit of good luck and patience. Guys, keep an eye open. While I'm waiting here, I'm confident some huge black witches could arrive tonight.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'm hot and sweaty because I'm in a rainforest. But I'm also hot and sweaty because I'm seeing large moths. And nothing makes me hotter and sweatier than large moths. Let's catch them with my net and examine these beautiful creatures. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I am truly happy that I am able to do work like this. It's been a dream of mine for a long time. It's cool I can finally make a difference and see some of my dream species up close for real.
Wow, they arrived. So what do we have here? This is known as Ascaphala odorata, also known as the black witch moth. And these large moths that are found in tropical places on the American continent are crazy for rotting fruit. Here's a tip. Try fermenting rotting banana, and if you like, add some beer, and then check back at night and photograph the moths that are attracted to your fruit. If you live in South American rainforest, there's a good chance you can attract this marvelous animal too. Some indigenous cultures associate the animal with bad luck, or an omen of disease or death, giving them the name Black Witch. Despite their large size and superstitions aside, these animals are actually quite harmless. This is actually my first time seeing black witches in real life in the wild. You guys are witnessing the first time I ever found them. And they're seriously large and beautiful moths. Interestingly, black witches are less interested in coming to artificial lights than they are interested in coming to rotten fruit. If you want to attract large rabbits, try the baiting method with food instead of artificial light. So what's next? I'm going to capture and photograph them. But why? That's because I'm an entomologist working for a natural reserve in Brazil. And my job is to photograph and film all the remarkable species of invertebrates that we can find in this natural reserve. With a heavy focus on moths, because moths are my specialism, let's get started. Alright people, I'm going to catch them. And then I'm going to make a close-up of them tomorrow in the morning when I have good light. Let's skip to tomorrow. Wow, here they are, two enormous black witch moths. I actually had many individuals. Here's just two of them. Don't worry, I will release all of them back to nature after photographing and filming them. Why do these two moths look so different? Well, because they are a male and a female. Females of Ascaphala odorata can be distinguished from the males because they have a creamy white band that runs over their wings. Isn't that neat? Now you can distinguish them too. In the folklore of many Central American cultures, it's associated with death or misfortune. The Black Witch lives from the southern United States, Mexico and Central America all the way down to Brazil, which in my opinion is a respectably large distribution. Adults feed on overripe rainforest fruit, especially bananas, and larvae consume the leaves of plants. Most of its host plants are legumes. It favors acacia species, but also abacia, Kentucky coffee tree or Gymnocladus, and candlebush or senna. It's also possible to find it because in Inga and Prosopis, because I found suggestions of the fact these could be possible host plants. Interestingly, the moth is mostly tropical in distribution, but adults can migrate northwards in rare occasions, even all the way up to Canada during summer, which is crazy. However, I couldn't find any evidence that adults can survive the winter, so they either migrate back or simply perish from lower temperatures later in the year. They seem to have a long lifespan, although how long precisely is not known to me, but more than several weeks at least, and they are able to sustain themselves if there is plenty of food available to them. As with a lot of frugivorous moths, they are attracted to the volatile smell of alcohol, which can be an indicator of fermenting fruits to them. Have you ever seen a black witch in the wild? If so, then let me know in the comments. I've always dreamed of seeing them in real life with my own eyes. There are so many moths that you will never get to see in the wild unless you travel. Well, that's fantastic, right? I managed to attract black witches with overripe fermenting bananas. That's as expected. That's what I was after. So why am I sharing this with you? Isn't that a species that's not related to this video? Well, my observation is as follows. I did this for a long time, for over a month. I checked the ripe fruit every day. I found a lot of witch moth. I found moths from the genus Latis.
I found black witch moths, but here's the observation. The white witch came to the bait 0 times. Huh? Supposedly both of these species should be feeding on ripe fermenting fruit, right? So why do I get dozens of black witch and no white witch? That's weird. If this species would like fermenting fruit, wouldn't it come to the feeder at some point? That's food for thought, because a lot of sources say the white witch, Thysania agrippina, is a fructivore. But is there evidence of this? I start to wonder. Is there evidence of this? Is there pictures of these moths coming to bait? Is there pictures of these moths coming to ripe fruit? If so, show me one. Email one to me, bart.coppens@hotmail.com, if you see a white witch feeding on rotten fruit. Because I haven't seen it, despite attracting moths with ripe fruit for over a month. Now there are several things that could be going on here. As bait, I primarily use bananas and jackfruit. In this video I used bananas, but I also used rotting jackfruits. And these seem to work perfectly fine for most frugivorous moths. But there were no white witches coming to my bait ever. Which is strange, because the white witch is present in this area. So if the white witch is here in this area, shouldn't it come to my bananas? It got me thinking. The thing is, with moths that feed, moths that have a functional proboscis, their options of feeding are very limited, right? There's basically 3 categories of moths. The first category is moths that feed on flowers. The second category is moths that feed on tree sap. The third category is frugivores who come to fermenting fruit. I don't really know any exceptions to these 3 dietary options. The white witch must be feeding, in my opinion, either on tree sap, either on flower nectar, or either on rotting fruit. And for a long time we assume it's a fruit feeder, because that's what all the witch moths do. The black witch comes to bananas, so do many of the relatives. But I didn't really see... Now what's also possible, of course, and this is a more simple explanation, maybe they're picky about what kind of fruits they eat. Maybe they don't like bananas, right? Maybe they don't like jackfruits. But if that's true, that raises another question. What kind of fruits do they feed on then? Because I realize maybe it's possible for frugivorous moths to have their preferences when it comes to what kind of fruits they're feeding on. Now I can't imagine that being true, because rotting fruit can be a scarce resource. I don't imagine it's commonly available for them every day. But it raises the question, why can I not catch any white witch moths using rotting fruit as bait? If there are only particular kinds of fruits that they like, then this raises a new question for their ecology. What kind of fruits do they eat then? Which ones are they attracted to and which ones are they not attracted to? Because for their survival this has implications. If they only feed on particular rotting fruits and not just any species of fruit, that means it needs to be present in the environment, right? Their food has to be present somehow, somewhere. Or what if they feed on flowers? Probably not. Because I don't know any much rabbits who feed on flowers. Even their underwing moth relatives in Europe, like the catucalas, even they tend to feed on like tree sap and rotting fruit. I see them often on cherries and apples in summer. And even other witch moths, I don't know any of them who visit flowers at all. So I would say it's still most likely to be a frugivore. But if it's a frugivore, it seems to be a picky one. Or something weird is going on that I don't understand. Maybe they only like feeding in particular places. Maybe on the places where I place the bait is not good enough for the white witch. I don't know. It's hard to say, but what could these moths be eating? See, people raise a lot of questions about the caterpillar and what do the caterpillars eat? We don't know. But a lot of people assume we know what the adults eat, right? Because it's simple. Figuring out what moths eat is not difficult because it's always something limited to a sugary substance, right? It can't be in many things at once, but still, I wonder why is it easy for me to find the moths on the trunk of trees during the day, but it's very hard for me to get them on fruit bait? Think about this one, people. Just an observation, I don't have an answer to the question, but I raise a new question for you.
A new species of white witch moth? That's right, recently a new white witch species was described. Next to Thysania agrippina, another white witch has been described that is almost identical to Thysania agrippina. Recently, due to taxonomic changes, an attempt to describe a new species has been made, Thysania winbrechlini.
In my personal opinion, this is a farce. Now, I don't want to get too much into genealogy, I don't want to get too much into DNA and taxonomy, because this video is not about taxonomy. It's also a complicated subject and explaining everything to you could potentially take over an hour. This video is already very long. I don't want to unnecessarily extend it. But let me tell you about Brechlin and Meister. They are two entomologists who are very notorious for basically barcoding species of butterflies and moths. And in a lot of cases, sometimes they use morphology, but in a lot of cases, unfortunately, very weak evidence is used to describe new species. In some cases, in fact, Brechlin and Meister are known to publish species of butterflies and moths solely based on a small difference in DNA. Now, this is very questionable because DNA barcoding, it often depends on the cytochrome oxidase 1, which is a gene, a marker gene that is often used, and the amount of divergence between this mitochondrial gene is used to describe new species. Now, this may sound a little bit complicated for some of my viewers, but let's just say there is a particular gene that is used as a marker to measure the genetic distance between two species. This is a little bit wonky at best, because first of all, we really don't know that much about DNA right now, and certainly not enough to warrant conclusions about how much difference in DNA makes a new species or not. In fact, in a lot of cases, there can be a large genetic distance between two breeding populations of what seem to be the same species that can even interbreed in the wild, and there can be very small genetic distances between two clearly different species that are morphologically different, geographically isolated, have a different ecology, but only a small genetic distance between them. So solely using DNA barcoding as a criteria for describing new species is wonky at best, especially if you don't use much morphological evidence. And I found a website that is known as the White Witch Watch, which I just mentioned before. And thankfully they put it into words brilliantly, so I'm just going to quote them. Their opinion also very strongly aligns with my opinion. But it's better to quote some experts on the matter who are more educated in biology than I am. The last couple of posts discussed the recent publication of Thysania winbrechlini, a new species split from Thysania agrippina by Brechlin and Meister. My original position was skepticism. Is this a careful and valid revision of the genus? My new position is outrage, based on what I have learned about taxonomic vandalism. An excellent piece in the Smithsonian discusses the general issue of scientists that name scores of new species based on thin evidence,
not to enhance understanding, but to fuel their egos. In the case of Thysania windbrechlini lead author Ronald Brechlin, in his lifetime has named over 1,400, to be precise, 1,420 of species of Lepidoptera he named in his lifetime. This is prima facie absurd. Linnaeus himself only managed to name 166 species in his lifetime. One writer has referred to a special category of Brechlin and Meister species. There is no doubt a case for investigation of the genus Thysania is warranted. It even seems likely that the species designations made in 1976, Agrippina and Zenobia, and the 1924 Pomponia will change when examined with modern data and modern technology. Hopefully a serious and careful researcher will engage in this task and repair any taxonomical vandalism committed. The primary author of the new species paper is Ronald Brechlin, a German entomologist with over 200 taxonomic publications. In the year 2010 alone, he published 33 papers, describing 51 new species and many lesser taxa in 1 year. That is, Ronald Brechlin made the case for a new species once in a week in that year, 1 new species per week, and in many other years. This leads me to skepticism. Is it not possible to rigorously make that many ideas? Where these many taxonomical papers published? Nearly all of them were contributed to Entomologists, which is a journal founded in 2008 by Ronald Brechlin and Frank Meister. My skepticism deepens. I highly doubt that the true authorities on the relevant taxa revealed the claims made in this journal. There is one small piece of follow-up that I can do, to assess the reliability of Brechlin's report of a morphological distinction between Agrippina and windbrechlini. He states that externally in windbrechlini we found both a double third transversal line in forewing and double second line in the hindwing, as opposed to almost single lines in Agrippina. I examined the photos available to me from iNaturalist and mapped the occurrence of these two morphologies. Red symbols indicate the records for the moth with double transversal lines in the hindwing, and blue symbols show a single line. There is a pattern here, the Agrippina type alone in the north and windbrechlini type central. However, this needs more data. The overlap that exists is also interesting. As final note, I collected 2 Agrippina in Roura, French Guiana, and consecutive nights at one location. Based on the Brechlin wind pattern, one of these was Agrippina and one was windbrechlini. Taxonomic, well, that is very unusual. Now, to summarize all this information for my viewers, these two authors, Brechlin and Meister, also publish in their own journal. They are basically two self-published scientists who are their own peer reviewers in many cases. Basically, if you guys know anything about a scientific process and the value of a peer review, this is pretty much fraudulent. It means they are the people who are reviewing their own papers. The position of a reviewer should be an independent one, or at least as much as possible. And passing your own papers, self-publishing them in your own journal and passing them through your own peer review, it's basically the equivalent of, I don't know, it's like a chef who is his own food critic, that's prizing his own dishes as very tasty, you know. Papers should be able to pass through a peer review that evaluates the paper's scientific worth, and to see if the evidence presented is strong enough to be worthy of publishing. If you are your own peer reviewer in many cases, this doesn't happen. So to me it is also clear that the
primary motivation to publish this new species was not out of an interest in insects, out of an interest in moths, but to fuel the respective egos of Mr. Brechlin and Meister. Unfortunately, this does not work because pretty much in the entire scientific community, Mr. Brechlin and Meister are remembered as two clowns. I'm going to go that far, even if that sounds a little bit harsh. Two absolute fraudsters who are basically self-publishing literally thousands of species at the rate of more than one new species described to science per week in some occasions, based on very thin and weak evidence. Many serious scientists I've spoken to think their publications are laughable. Many of their names immediately get synonymized. And to add insult to injury, many of them are named after themselves. Now, naming after something after yourself is questionable when it comes to natural sciences. In many cases it is not done. I think in some cases, if you are really proud of a new discovery, even if it's taboo, I would even go as far as to defend it if it's like for you a major discovery. But the rate and the scale of which it is happening in this case is absolutely ridiculous. And I would like to show you, for example, one of the species they described. For example, this is very laughable. Winbrechtlinia winbrechtlinii, described by Brechlin and Meister. Winbrechtlinia winbrechtlinii. This just goes to show some of the vanity of some of these people describing these names. And it's very important to emphasize they are nothing but clowns who deserve mockery. Seeing Winbrechtlinie in a species name nowadays is not an accomplishment or a compliment to the scientists who describe it. It's just a very sad situation. It's a very ugly name, Winbrechtlinie, that is used to indicate sloppy work, in my opinion. Now, that's all I want to say about the subject today, because we are talking about the biology of the white witch. And in fact, a new species of white witch was described to science. It had to be mentioned in the video, but I don't want to dwell on this subject for too long. All you have to know is that the description is questionable at best and done by two of the most fraudulent entomologists that are actively publishing right now. The two authors are commonly known as two taxonomical vandals. And this you should make any description of Mr. Ronald Brechlin and Mr. Meister with the biggest grain of salt. That being said, even a broken clock is right twice a day, and it requires more careful review and careful investigation of the material presented. And perhaps it would warrant a study, a broader study of the morphology and morphological variation of the species given their large range and surface areas, and see if indeed geographically and ecologically the moths are distinct and do vary. But it's a bit saddening to read. The thing is that splitting species without a strong evidence of splitting these species can complicate their conservation in some occasions. The good news is that the white witch moth is not, as we know it, is not threatened right now, nor is it worthy of conservation right now. But we understand so little of the species and its ecology. We should really take a further look into their potential life history first before drawing any conclusions, and potentially even splitting them up into more micro-species. Anyway, I have a surprise for Mr. Brechlin and Meister this year, because I'm going to make a special video talking about them and the things that they've done. So I hope they will enjoy that. But for now, let's move on.
Sadly, when you catch them though, they tend to rub off some of the hairs of their backs. Why? That's because the hairs on their backs are very loose, and if they are touched, they can rub off. When they struggle in a net when I catch them or in an enclosure, they tend to rub these hairs off rather quickly. In reality, their thorax is supposed to be white, but it's difficult to catch them in a good condition.
Unfortunately, I'll be completely honest to you, but it seems that catching these specimens of the white witch does seem to rub off some of the scales of their thorax. I'm gonna be honest, it damages them a little. The good news is that the hairs on their back are pretty lifeless, they don't really notice it themselves. So it is a more harmless modification, although the worst thing I could think about is the fact that when you rub off the scales of the thorax, it breaks up their camouflage a little bit, so their chances of surviving in the wild may be a little bit lower after that I've caught them. Because when they sit on a tree trunk and the orange spot on their back is visible because they are now bald, may reduce their chances of survival. That being said, all the animals that I caught in this video were returned to nature. I released all of them back into the wild. So I didn't kill any animals for the production of this video. Admittedly, I did harass them a little. But one of the things you guys should know is one of the reasons I came to Brazil is to study insects. It's my job. Yes, I made it my job. I study moths for a living. And sometimes trying to find out more information about a species we know little about warrants harassing the animals. Now, this is not something many people will come out and defend. Sometimes my videos get hateful comments like, "Bart, why are you harassing the animals? Leave them alone. Bart, why are you grabbing the butterfly? It's not a toy. Why are you taking the moth? You're being rough with them." One thing you should realize is in my lifetime, even though I am an amateur, I'm not a professional scientist, but I have discovered many new things about butterflies and moths that were new to science, and it was only possible because I grab, handle and catch them. Now when I do it, I make sure it's ethical, I make sure they are not protected species, which would be illegal. It's illegal to catch protected species. I follow the law, and whenever I do have to harass something, I make sure I have permits, or that it is not a protected species, which I don't need permits for. I disseminate information on the internet. I am also the owner of one of the biggest butterfly and moth channels on the internet. In fact, the biggest one right now, you're watching it. All of this for me is a justification, yes, to catch the animals, even if it does rub some of their scales off their backs. They are released back into the wild, so they should be capable of reproducing, even if perhaps their life just got a little bit harder than it was before I caught them. That being said, I just had to be totally honest with you, and I do think that the people in my comments who complain that I grab the insects too roughly or that I damage them, I think that is an anti-intellectual take. If it weren't for people like me, who take a closer look at insects, there wouldn't be any information available about them. Again, I don't have a degree, okay? I'm not an educated biologist, but you don't have to be. Even an amateur like me can discover many new things about butterflies and moths. And I've discovered many new life cycles of butterflies and moths in my lifetime. The proof is on my channel if you don't believe me. I have one of the biggest websites about butterflies and moths, one of the biggest YouTube channels. I educate people. I describe new things to science. I came here to Brazil because I have a passion for butterfly and moth conservation. I want to talk about it. I want to contribute knowledge. And in my opinion, therefore it is warranted that I take a closer look at these animals of which we know little. Because you never know when you are going to accidentally stumble upon the key information that you need to protect or conserve a species in the wild. So that's what I wanted to say about it. And maybe someday somebody who will discover the life cycle of the white witch in the wild. And if that happens, it means that in the future we can protect the species and conserve it if it ever becomes rare or endangered. If the species would become endangered today, there's nothing we can do to save it because we don't know what it eats. And that's one of the crucial things you have to understand. And if we ever discover the life cycle which will allow us to protect and conserve the insect, it's going to be because of somebody who took a closer look, who decided to take a specimen or a caterpillar and study it maybe in captivity, or at least touch the plants or looked for the insect in the vegetation. If your mentality is leave it alone, don't harass it, even if you know that examining it closer can lead to results that are beneficial to the species and its conservation and new to science, you're practically opposing the people who are trying to help conserve the species. So don't judge me too harshly. That being said, the orange bald spot on their back is not supposed to be there. When you catch them with a net, those hairs tend to rub off, unfortunately.
So forgive me, people, if I happen to rub off some of their skills. Please understand that the whole reason I came to Brazil is to study insects because I care about their conservation. And sadly, making observations on some species of insect, yes, involves harassing them a little bit sometimes. I hope that most of my viewers will understand the greater good and the importance of work like this, because very few people are actually studying these insects. And my channel has crowdfunded a lot of research in the past and probably in the future that has helped us discover a lot of new things about butterflies and moths that will promote their conservation and protection. So forgive me and please understand the big picture.
So why is it a problem that we don't know the life cycle of the white witch anyways? Well, the thing is, if you want to conserve something, you have to understand it in the first place. If you don't know what something eats, you cannot protect it. The good news is that nowadays the white witch moth is still a relatively common species. It's not hard to find them. They have a huge distribution from Central America all the way to South America to Argentina and Brazil. So I don't think the insect is going to be endangered anytime soon. However, it is a forest species that prefers mostly primary forest and sometimes more mature secondary forest. That does make it vulnerable because it is tied to forest and forest ecology. It needs forest to live. It's its environment, its habitat. And it just so happens that there is massive deforestation going on in many parts of South America. The Amazon rainforest is being deforested in a lot of occasions, unfortunately. The Atlantic rainforest in Brazil, where I found these animals, is also rapidly being deforested. And the thing is, we don't really know. We don't know their biology, we don't know how they breed. So that means maybe it is vulnerable in ways we don't understand, right? Sometimes a species can seem very widespread and ubiquitous until their populations start to collapse because of degradation of the environment. Maybe the host plant they like to use is in trouble and is going extinct because of deforestation or a virus or an invasive pathogen or invasive species of herbivore that makes the plant species decline, and so will the animals decline that depend upon this plant. If something like that were to happen, there is nothing that we could do to conserve this beautiful and marvelous species. I mean, they are treasures of the earth. They deserve to be protected. They deserve to be conserved if they happen to be rare or endangered animals, I am a big advocate for the conservation of insects who are very important for our environment. Every species counts, and this large and iconic species is one we should monitor. But that is sadly impossible. Well, it's not impossible, but it is harder, because the less you know, the less you understand what a species demands from its environment, the less you can protect the elements, those elements that it needs to survive. It's very simple. You don't know what it eats. We don't know what to give them if they become endangered. We don't know what to preserve. So that's food for thought. So for the conservation of this species, it would be very noble to figure out their life history. Because it's more than just a curiosity, it's more than just a scientific fun fact. It's something we could actively use for the conservation of this animal.
And before we proceed, I would like to make you guys aware of one of the most fantastic websites on the internet. It's called the White Witch Watch. The White Witch Watch is pretty much a blog, but also a research attempt by several researchers to look into the biology and the ecology of the white witch. And they post constant updates with fascinating information. And if the people from the White Witch Watch website are watching my video right now, I would like to thank you guys very much for your work. In fact, when I was younger, it was your website that inspired me to talk about this moth on YouTube. Your website was actually my first contact and the first time I learned about this species. And from there I became more and more fascinated. So if you guys were ever wondering if your website has at least make an impact on the people that read it, the answer is yes. Personally for me, your website has made a huge difference and you guys are a total inspiration for me. Everybody who is watching this, please consider checking out the website The White Witch Watch. It's a fantastic website that talks about the ecology of this species and adds some very interesting and educated conjectures when it comes to their possible ecology. Thank you guys so much. In the past, they've even tried giving a monetary reward for the first person to figure out the life history of the species, or the first person to even raise caterpillars to the second life stage. To my knowledge, this still hasn't happened, and I wonder if the monetary reward is still valid. If it is, I would definitely encourage some of my viewers who live in the rainforest to try some experiments themselves, and if they succeed, contact the White Witch Watch, because who knows? Maybe, this reward is waiting for you if you are the first person to discover the host plant.
And with that, ladies and gentlemen, I have done my best to educate you today about one of my favorite species of moth, the White Witch Moth. I think we pretty much discussed almost everything there is to discuss about them. We talked about their distribution, where they are found, what habitat they prefer. I showed you close-ups of real live animals. I showed you some of the history and the publications that exist when it comes to, well, where they were historically found. We talked today about their taxonomy, a new species that was potentially described. We talked about really many things, even the possibility of them being in the USA, and why I disagree with that, because the evidence for that is pretty wonky. I even showed you pictures to prove that it's indeed the largest moth on Earth, including a specimen which I think is the current world record holder. So this video should really contain almost everything there is to talk about right now when it comes to the White Witch. I would like to apologize for my accent. Sometimes I talk too long in very lengthy amount of monologues. Sometimes I struggle to find the right words to say something because I'm not a native English speaker. And sometimes I forget important words, especially the fancy, difficult words. They're not in my vocabulary, so I try my best to explain something scientific in a language that's not my mother tongue. But I had evidence with me today combined with footage of the moths that are found in the wild. So with that, we are almost at the end, but there's one more important thing I want to say. The Atlantic rainforest in Brazil is one of the most deforested rainforests in the world. The future of this rainforest is uncertain, however, and this is why I came to Brazil to help. Reforestation is the answer to deforestation. Here at Regua we have a massive tree nursery that grows thousands of native trees and plants. And these will be planted in deforested areas such as farmland. And slowly this will help to restore the Atlantic rainforest. It's a long process, but that means that Regua is contributing to the restoration of the rainforest that is constantly being lost. And that, my friends, is a noble pursuit. Look at that. Last but not least, ladies and gentlemen, not only Regua needs your help, I need your help too. My channel contributes to conservation and reforestation efforts like Regua. That's why I'm working here currently, to help. But my YouTube channel is completely and utterly demonetized by YouTube. That means that when I make a video, I don't get a single dollar for it in return. YouTube refuses to tell me why I am demonetized, and therefore I have resorted to crowdfunding. This whole trip to Brazil, including my residence here, the flight tickets, the equipment that I need, was all paid for by my fans. I'm not saying this to brag or show off. I know that I'm in a very privileged position. However, without you guys helping me, this video would not exist and none of this would be possible. And I would not be able to contribute to conservation and reforestation of the rainforest. I really want my YouTube channel to have a positive impact on the environment, and therefore I will travel the world to help out and give awareness to on social media several wildlife conservation and reforestation projects. But I can't do it without your help, because what I do is expensive. I cannot travel the world, I cannot show you these places without the financial donations and contributions of my fans and viewers. So if you like my channel and if you like the show, please consider donating to us or sponsoring us on a platform like Patreon or PayPal. The links are available in the description and there you can read how to do it. Of course, not contributing doesn't make you less of a viewer. I appreciate all your viewership, all your likes, all your comments. You don't have to give me anything unless you are willing and able to. However, with the help of my viewers, I can travel the world, show you the coolest insects, the coolest nature, give awareness for their conservation in the future, and this will help the environment. It's a win-win situation and you will get to see awesome videos. Hope to see you next time. One thing that I want to say is that my channel supports the conservation of butterflies and moths and the conservation of the Atlantic rainforest in Brazil. Recently I came to a new collaboration with a natural reserve in Brazil. It's called REGWA, Reserva Ecologica de Guapiatsu. REGWA is a fantastic place. I would totally recommend all of you to go there if you can afford it. They also accept tourists. They even have a tourist lodge. Everyone can visit. Yes, you watching this video can visit too. They even accept volunteers. They even accept students. They even accept tourists. You have a luxury tourist house. Everybody can join. But more importantly, this natural reserve spends all the money that it makes on the conservation of the environment and reforestation. The rainforest today where I showed you these white witch moths is one of the most deforested rainforests in the world. It's the Atlantic rainforest in Brazil. And the Atlantic rainforest is deforested over 85%. And if we don't do anything to stop it, and the deforestation continues, there may not be anything left in the future. This is why conservation efforts like REGWA are very important. REGWA also invests a lot in entomology, in people like me who study insects. That is why REGWA was so kind to help me and my work, because they believe in what I do. And for that I am very grateful. I hope that they will be very happy with the collaboration. In return, I also hope to promote them a little bit on social media. I don't get paid to promote REGWA on social media. I'm doing it because I genuinely want to, because of the kindness out of my own heart, because they were very kind to me. My time there was amazing. REGWA is a very beautiful place. And I just want to tell you, if you're watching, everybody can go there. But more importantly, my work there as an entomologist, and who was just looking at the species here in the area, making observations. I was able to make my own contribution. I always wanted to do something for the environment. And what I really want to show you is the reforestation that they do. Because REGWA is investing in the money that they make into reforestation of the Atlantic rainforest. They even have a tree nursery with native trees that they grow, and they plant it in reforested lands so that the forest can grow back and be restored. And I want to show you that now for a second. So let's cut back to Brazil. And one of the important things that I really want to end this video with is the fact that my YouTube channel is completely and utterly demonetized by YouTube. This for me has always been a very bitter pill to swallow, because I'm very passionate about talking about insects, promoting the conservation and protection of butterflies, promoting the conservation and protection of species of moths. I try to make them popular to young people on social media, how cool they are, how awesome they are, so more people start talking about how they need to be protected, how they need to be researched and conserved. Last but not least, my channel even started now collaborating with a reserve in Brazil that does reforestation. Everything on paper is almost perfect, right? Like, I'm very happy to be able to make a good impact on the environment now, to have such awesome partners to collaborate with, to meet the awesome people at Regua. But the fact my YouTube channel is demonetized and YouTube refused to tell me why. That's the worst part. I emailed them, I asked them, why did you demonetize my channel? And they refused to tell me. So that means when I upload the video on this website on YouTube and a lot of people watch the video and they click on it, I don't make any money from it in return. And I'm gonna be honest, that sucks. That makes my life and my work more difficult. Hey, I'm not on YouTube to become rich and famous. If I want to make money, I would study to become an accountant or a lawyer or a banker. But I wouldn't become a YouTuber. There's very little money in YouTube. The problem is that I do spend a ridiculous amount of time and resources on making these videos. I do it all myself. These videos are homemade. I don't have a production team. I don't have a writer telling me what to write, what to say in the camera. I don't have anybody giving me ideas for what to do. Nobody is sponsoring me. I don't have any companies that pay me financially to make videos. And some of my videos are very long and take many resources. For example, the flight tickets to Brazil were paid for by my fans. And I'm not saying this to brag. Haha, I'm Bart Coppens and my fans pay for my flight tickets to Brazil because I'm a famous YouTuber. I'm not entitled to anything. Nobody is entitled to money just for making videos. However, it is important for you, if you enjoy my content, to realize that most of the work I put into this channel, I only get a small amount of it back, and that's because of crowdfunding. Right now there's almost 100 people that donate to my channel on a monthly basis on the website Patreon. All of them buy a subscription, and by buying a subscription they donate a certain amount every month. And in return they get rewards, for example their name in the credits, but also merchandise, moth stickers, moth posters, moth t-shirts. I designed them myself, also butterfly stickers, butterfly mugs. That's the kind of stuff I send in return for people who sponsor my channel. I'm really desperate and looking for sponsors, and I want to end my video with the following message. If you like my video, if you like my show, if you like the videos I make on YouTube, please consider donating or tipping. Only if you're willing and able to. I understand the economy is doing badly. Many people can't afford to pay their rent. Help yourself before you help someone else, especially a YouTuber. But if you like to watch my show, you think it's interesting, you are willing and able to donate, then please consider doing so. It helps me greatly. Without the donations from my viewers, this channel really wouldn't exist. This video would not exist. I would not even be able to afford going to Brazil. It was only because of people helping me who watch this channel that I was able to travel to South America and film this insect for you, right? And I understand by doing that I'm in a very privileged position. There's not many people who have fans willing to pay for their travels or make contributions. But you also have to realize that while I'm privileged, for me it's the only way to do it. And the only way for me is for you to make fun videos and promote butterfly and moth conservation is by asking people directly, even though it's perhaps very bold and comes off as demanding, which I really don't want to be. If you like my show, please consider donating to me. There's many options. You can make a donation with PayPal. You can send me money digitally with PayPal. There's also Patreon where you can buy a subscription. There's also a website named Ko-Fi, and if we hit a certain tips goal on the website Ko-Fi, it's $55. And I will make a special video showing you a special snack for my country. It's a tradition we have on this channel. People who donate to my channel and sponsor me also earn special rewards. They can participate in polls that sometimes decide what kind of video I'm going to make. Your name will be in the credits. You can also personally communicate with me on Patreon and you can do requests, or I can give you advice about insects. There's all sorts of stuff. Sorry for the crowdfunding, sorry for the internet begging and fundraising. But because of that we can enable doing the reforestation efforts. We can enable me collaborating with a natural reserve in Brazil, showing you what they do in Regua, and maybe many more things in the future. Who knows what country I'm going to next? It could be India. It could be in the United States of America. Imagine Bart Coppens in the United States of America showing you the rarest insects there. It could happen. Maybe I can go to Indonesia or Malaysia. It can only happen if I can afford it because of the crowdfunding. And so I have to remind people, if you like the show, consider donating. Sorry for that, I have to do it. It's the only way I can survive and make more videos for you. Hope you enjoyed it. It was a wonderful day talking about insects. And now I'm going to play the credits. And the credits display the names of all the people who are subscribed to my patreon.com subscription platform. Everybody who donates to my Patreon will get their name in the credits after special videos like this one. Hope you enjoyed it. I filmed many special insects for you next week, so like and subscribe. And I will be back soon with more cool, interesting insect facts to talk about. Goodbye.
Some notes about the wingspan. From wingtip to wingtip, this specimen seems to be about 25 centimeters in size. That's a decent size. Some online sources claim they can be over 30 centimeters. I'm not sure if that's actually true, but I also don't instantly disbelieve it, because I imagine they vary in size per individual. Some individuals are larger than others. And one particular specimen that's above average in size could, within the range of size of this species, perhaps be over 30 centimeters, who knows? There's not that much data on it, I suppose, how many people are measuring them. This is also not the official wingspan measurement, I suppose, because the forewings are supposed to be in a 90-degree angle to the body. I think if we do that, we may reach 26 centimeters maybe. So this is not the official measurement, but like in its natural resting position it's about 25 centimeters. Its wingtips seem to be a little bit ragged, but that's the way I found it in the wild. This chip was also missing from its wing in the wild. It's possible to find perfect specimens sometimes, but most of the time they already have like minor damage. Because when they fly, the wings do make friction with objects, or they get attacked by birds. That's when chips of their wings slowly go missing over time.